Hey everybody. So give me a thumbs up or some kind of signal in the chat if you can hear me. Let's just make sure we've got sound. Make sure all is good. So I'll wait till I hear from somebody in the chat that you can hear me. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Great to see everybody. Well, great to see everybody's name here. I actually had my headphones on a minute ago, and I'm like, why do I have headphones on? I can't. There's nothing for me to hear. So today I'm going to talk about how to get in an artist's head, because to write for an artist, you've got to really write a song that sounds like the artist wrote it for the most part. It needs to sound, when they're saying the song, singing the song, it needs to sound like it's really natural and authentic coming out of their mouth. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of different ways to do that. But I think the first way is, instead of asking, what would this artist cut, you ask, what does this artist care about? And I think you start digging into, what kinds of things does this artist do in their spare time? What kinds of things do they talk about when they're doing interviews? And those of you that know me well know that I do a lot of research into what artists say in interviews, because I want to know what they're thinking about. And also, just studying the artist lifestyle. So what's it like to be an artist and live on the road more than 200 days a year or something like that? What would that be like if you were away from your family that much? Or, what would the challenges be? All those kinds of things. But if you can start to understand, what does this artist care about, then you can get a much better grasp on what kinds of things you want to write for them. And if you have questions, put those in the chat, of course, but feel free to do that at any point. All that to say, you kind of have to get to know the artist. Every now and then someone will say, let's say Bailey Zimmerman is a country artist, and they'll say, let's write something for Bailey Zimmerman. And I'll say, I don't know much about him at all. Almost know nothing about him. So if we're going to write for him, somebody in the room has to be pretty familiar with what kinds of things he would do. Sometimes we can get a little information from pitch sheets, like, here's, the artist wants this kind of song, or whatever that might be. But if we can get into, I know some things about this artist that give me an inside edge, then we have a better shot. So starting with, what does this artist care about? The next thing is to study the artist's brand, but don't write a caricature of that brand. So don't write something that's just so stereotypically that person, that it could not work for someone else, and it doesn't maybe even sound natural for them. So an example would be, if someone one time played me a song they had written for Jake Owen, and it was about how Jake Owen met his wife, and it talked about what she was wearing and where they were and what he said and what she said. And when I listened to the song, I thought, if I was Jake Owen, I would be a little creeped out by that, because it's too much. It's not a song about finding the person that you love unexpectedly. That's a human experience. Finding a woman in a blue skirt and a white top and at this beach and saying this and this is not the human experience. That's Jake Owen's experience alone. So you want to write a song that is relatable to their brand, but not that is so on the nose. Another example would be, Kenny Chesney has a rum company called Blue Chair Rum, and he's got a song called Old Blue Chair. Well, if you start putting rum and Old Blue Chair in the song, it sounds like you're writing a commercial for Kenny Chesney, not a song for Kenny Chesney, because Kenny Chesney wants his audience to relate to those songs, not just him, So, and Jake Owen wants his audiences to relate to the song. So if he sings about finding love unexpectedly, lots of people in the audience can relate to that. But if he sings all these specifics about his situation, then they can't relate to it as much. Someone said, you mean an island song for Kenny Chesney? No, it doesn't mean you can't write an island song because he loves islands. But you have to be careful that it's not just, I guess the best word would be pandering to like putting everything that he loves in the song. And an example is one song of mine that he has cut. There's a line in the song that says 3 states from her and 90 miles from Cuba. Well, I know that Kenny Chesney loves Key West, and I know that Kenny Chesney will know that Key West is 90 miles from Cuba. And so that's kind of like a little inside thing, but other people can relate to the song. It's not just about Key, and the song is not about Key West. The singer just happens to be in Key West. So yeah, sometimes, toes in the sand can be one. There's like okay, they're going to go, there's too many of those, so think about their brand, but be careful how you approach it, because the label and the artists are looking at the whole artist picture, not just one piece of their brand. And someone played me a song a while back in SongTown that melodically, and the track sounded just like Miranda Lambert. It sounded like this would be a great pitch, but the lyric was kind of a poor me, I got my heart broke, so I'm sitting home on a Friday night eating a TV dinner and watching a movie. Well, that's not Miranda Lambert's brand. Miranda Lambert's the strong woman. If she gets broken up with, she's going to be out there on Friday night dancing with other guys and hitting on guys. And so you have to look at both sides of the brand. Musically, where does she go? And lyrically, where does she go? Or where will she not go? Let's see. Chris said, who would have thought Ernest was going to make a boat album for his latest? Loving it, but so different from his previous stuff. Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. Great question here. How do you determine their brand? You do a lot of research, and I think of it this way too. It's like if I was a political speechwriter and they came in and asked me to write a speech for a politician that I don't know, I'm not going to be able to do that very well, because to write a speech that sounds real and natural and honest from that politician, not that any politicians are honest, but you know what I mean. But to write that kind of speech, I have to know a lot about that politician and the kind of language they use, and we'll get to some of that in a minute. But so you research, what kinds of songs is this artist doing? And we'll get to some more about that in a minute. But it's just a lot of research into, what's this artist like? What do they say? What do they not say? All that kind of stuff. All right. Let's see. Frank said, how do you even get near a pitch sheet? We put pitch sheets in SongTown so if you're a SongTown member, you've got access to pitch sheets all the time. Somebody says, there a specific website you would use, or do you have a subscription to the Row? No, Clay and I get several pitch sheets, so we just put what we get into the SongTown forum. So if you scroll down, I think it's toward the bottom, you can find pitch sheets there. And that tells you a little bit, but it doesn't tell you enough to really have a great grasp on what the artist is going to do. And so the next one is know what the artist would never say. So like I mentioned, Miranda Lambert's never going to say, poor, poor, pitiful me. That's just not her brand. People know she's a strong woman, strong-minded woman, and she's going to get revenge if you mess with her. That's more of her brand. And you can look at every artist and kind of find those things. Kenny Chesney rarely says anything directly about love. He'll talk about summer romances that fell apart or that he misses, but he rarely does a love song. In fact, he put one out that he wrote with Ed Sheeran, and it didn't do all that well for him because it's not his brand. I think he was maybe testing that to see if he could put this song out they wrote with Ed Sheeran and people would believe that love song from him. And he's notoriously not a singer of love songs. His brand does not include really romantic kind of things, except in the nostalgic sense. Um, Tina said, yes, that's a good. Um, Once I said Carrie Underwood writes all her ballads herself, so stuff like that's really good to know. Yeah, when I was getting a chance to write, a friend of mine got a publishing deal with 19 Management, which is the management company that runs all that American Idol stuff. And so I knew we would have a good shot at a Carrie Underwood cut because we had that inside connection and they owned a piece of that song. And so I did research and I discovered that she wrote at that time all of her ballads. She wrote all of her story songs, but she did not write her up-tempo male bashing songs like Before He Cheats. And so I brainstormed ideas around that. So we wrote a man bashing song, Betrayed Our Gender, and she cut it. Lo and behold, and there's a double platinum plaque back there for that. But that wouldn't have happened if I had not done that research, because when people come to me, like in SongTown, with a song that they say, I think Carrie Underwood would love this song, almost 100% of the time, it's a ballad. And because so many of her big hits have been ballads and she's got such a powerful voice that they go, that's what they associate with Carrie Underwood. But if you don't take the time to do your research, you wouldn't know that she writes all those songs. And I think it's probably because she wants to, those things tend to be emotional things. So she wants to write her more emotional songs and she knows her voice. And so if she's going to write her big rangy ballad, she probably, if she's going to sing one, she probably wants to write it so she can make sure that it's something she can comfortably sing all the time. Let's see, Alan, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's see. Welcome everybody that are first timers. Yeah, Tim McGraw is not going to be chasing women and honky tonking for the most part, or hinky tinking either. Yeah, exactly. So it's important to understand what the artist won't talk about, because you don't want to pitch something to an artist and have the label or the artist themselves or whatever say, "Hey, you obviously don't know who I am. You're pitching me something that's way off base." Paul asked if I study what keys the artists are pitching to sing best in and cater to that. I don't worry about that so much. They know that they can change the key. I just worry more about the range. So I want my demo to sound good. I want it to sound like it's in the ballpark of what they might do, but I don't worry about studying, they love to sing in key of A all the time, that kind of thing. I do not worry about that. Tina says, it's good to target emerging artists. Where would you research about them and what could be signs that are about ready to take off? One really great technique I have found is to go to ChatGPT or something like that and say, I want to write a song for, let's say, Zach Top, and give me common themes that he likes to sing about, things that he won't talk about, study recent interviews and tell me where he's at in his life or with his relationships. And I get into this big, long conversation with ChatGPT about whatever artist it is I'm researching. And so, it can find like little hometown interviews they did in their hometown newspaper. It can find pretty obscure things that you would have a harder time finding, and it consolidates it all for you. So, I can do that and get a really good grasp of what kinds of things they'll sing, what kinds of things they won't sing. So that's one of my techniques I do with younger artists, because it is harder with emerging artists because they don't have such a big body of work. With a Tim McGraw or a Kenny Chesney or a pop artist, Katy Perry, that's been around a long time. You can just look at their body of work and there's a lot more out there. One of the reasons I tend to target bigger artists just because even if I miss with a bigger artist, there's lots of other artists that want to be like that. So if I write a great song and Carrie Underwood doesn't do it, then there's a lot of female artists that would do the kind of songs that she does. The next one is to understand the artist's relationship with their fans, because you got to remember that you're not just writing for the artist, you're writing something that their fans are going to relate to. So when Kenny Chesney had my song "Everybody Wants to Go to Heaven" went number one, and he did it, said in an interview, "This is exactly what my audience wants to hear from me." And what he meant was, this fits my brand. It feels honest coming out of my mouth. They probably think he wrote it, which is fine with me, And but all those things make a song feel natural for an artist, and so they are looking for songs not just that they can relate to. Like back to the story about Jake Owen's wife, they're looking for songs that their audience can relate to, because they're wanting to sell tickets to a concert, and they're wanting to sell records for people who still buy records, and they're wanting for their songs to stream really well. So understanding their relationship to their fans is super important. What kind of people go to a Kenny Chesney show? And I keep using him as an example because he's one that I've studied extensively. But he calls his fans Barefoot Nation, because there are people that like going to the beach and being barefoot, and sort of, in a way, I think modern day beach hippie cowboys, that kind of thing. And so understanding what kind of people come to their shows is important in writing the songs, because that's the end customer for your song. Sabrina said, how do you find the other artists? There's a lot on the pitch sheet. So when you get a pitch sheet, it'll show you'll be names on there you've never heard of. So that's one sometimes I'll go and research and try to see if they're people that I would like to write for. Tina said, you're already a brand in the business, and my thought was to target emerging artists, as I'm not a known songwriter. Yeah, I mean, yes, I wasn't saying that wasn't a good idea, but what I was saying was, sometimes you can get a better, you have better chance if you target a big artist, even if you know you will never get something on that artist, because writing a song for a big artist like that puts you in a little different mindset. And here's why: because emerging artists often don't know who they are. And if you write a great song that helps them establish who they are, which is probably what a great song that would need to be for a big artist, you're going to have a better chance. And I can't count the times that an artist has taken one of my songs and like a brand new artist and said, okay, this is it. I'm going to build my album around this song. And by the time they record their album, they're in a totally different direction, and they throw my song out, and they don't, so they've been going around playing my song for everybody in town saying, we want stuff like this. And then they kind of evolve into something else. And so writing for emerging artists can be a little more tricky, because you don't know as much about them, and because they don't know exactly who they want to be all the time. Let's see. Good question. How do you add your own emotional expression to songs you're writing for the artist to connect with their audience? I mean, typically I write about things, about emotions that I'm familiar with. So the story of my song does not have to be something that I've personally done, but typically the universal emotion in the song is something I've experienced. So if I know something about losing someone that's dear to me, I can write lots of different songs around that emotion, or that ball of emotions, because there's a lot of emotions in that. If it's something I haven't experienced, I tend to not write it unless I'm with someone who has, So then what I'm doing is I'm going, okay, when I felt lonely and afraid I would be lonely forever. So I went through a bad divorce. There was a really lonely time, and I thought, man, I may be alone the rest of my life. I go back to that time and go, okay, if I'm going to write about loneliness, how did I feel in that time? What was that like? And then I try to find a universal way to write to that feeling. So I don't write my specific experience necessarily, but I write from a place of familiarity with the emotion that I'm trying to convey, if that makes sense. All right. After fan relationship, look for their recurring emotional territory. Like, where do they go emotionally often? So, Kenny Chesney will sing songs about nostalgic, love, lost, summer romances, a girl he still thinks about from years ago. He will sing songs about life. So he's got songs about, like living fast forward and don't blink. There Goes My Life. There's some really deep songs about life and some fun songs about life. And then he will sing songs about the beach lifestyle. And a lot of people sometimes will go, well, he sings beach songs. Really, he's singing more about what's the lifestyle of being, like of living in a beach town or living on an island. What's that life like? So the songs are not so much about a beach as they're about that lifestyle. And beyond that, there's not a lot that he does. And if you study an artist enough, you can figure out, okay, what are those things they do? Like I mentioned earlier, Carrie Underwood, she does kind of sappy ballads, emotional ballads. She does story songs. And then she does these up-tempo man bashing songs. Pretty much everything she does is one of those. And so if you, break the artist's work down into those categories, you can get a great insight into what you've got a shot of writing for them. So where do they keep going back to? Do they sing a lot about family? Do they sing about regret or ambition or freedom or heartbreak? Do they do spiritual kinds of songs? So you want to find those emotional places that they continue to go back to so that you can write something that addresses that emotion in a different way. The next one is to separate the artist's voice from the artist's vocal ability. So their voice is kind of what they want to say to the world. Like, how do they want to be perceived to the world? That's their voice. Their vocal ability is how many notes they can hit, what kinds of runs they can do. But you want to think about how does this artist present themselves to the world, and what do they seem to want to say? If you looked at my body of work, you would see there's certain themes I talk about. There's certain themes I don't talk about. I don't want to write a cheating song unless it's talking about cheating being bad for the relationship and bad for the person. I don't want to write a song that glorifies cheating. I don't want to write a song typically that makes people feel bad. I grew up with a dad who was a drug addict, and there's a lot that I could say about that in songs, and I have written some songs about that, but they're not really ones that I want people to hear. They're more therapy songs for myself because I'm not interested in making somebody feel bad. And a good example would be, I was out on the road with Billy Currington one time, and he said he had a top 5 hit called Walk a Little Straighter Daddy that was about his dad being an alcoholic. And he said, man, when I would play that at shows, people would get up and leave. It was like big groups of people would just get up and leave, and they'd go get a beer or go to the bathroom. And then they would come back when I started singing something fun. And he said, I realized that people come to my show to get away from their alcoholic daddy, not to hear me whine about mine. But we don't think about those kinds of things always, So I don't want to sing a song that makes people feel bad or think about their drug addicted parent or their alcoholic parent. But artists are the same way. If you study them enough, you can figure out what do they want their voice to be in this world. Miranda Lambert, that we talked about a while ago, is a good example of, I think she wants her voice to be a voice of strength for women. She wants to encourage women, don't put your whole existence on a man. Be your own person. If someone breaks up with you, be strong and get on with your life and show him he made a mistake, that kind of thing. So learning to understand what is their voice that and how, what do they want to present to the world is important. Um, Question: are you comfortable sharing with artists that extremely picky, hard to write for? Would this be part of knowing the artist? I mean, I'm not going to tell you which artists are hard to write with or for, um, but some of them are, and I tend to just not write with them. But when you're pitching songs, if you pitch someone a great song who's an artist, it would be stupid of them not to record it. So a lot of times what happens is we think all our songs are great, and we pitch good songs or even really good songs to an artist, and they don't cut them, and then we're like, well, it's a closed system. They're not going to cut my song because they don't know me. But I've seen over and over artists cut songs from people they had no idea who they were because it was a hit song. All right, next, ask yourself, what slot does this fill on the record or in a show? Like, so if Bruno Mars recorded my song, where would this fit on his album, and where would this fit in his show? Does it slow the show down, or does it give the show energy? And this hit home with me on this same trip with Billy Currington out on the road. He was opening for Kenny Chesney, and he said, I want you to watch my show and then watch Kenny's show and tell me the difference. And so after the show, he came back up and said, okay, what was the difference? And I said, energy. And he said, yeah, Kenny rocks all night long, and I've got all these mid-tempo things. And he jokingly blamed it on me. He was like, yeah, you gave me 2 hits that are like mid-tempo slow things, and so I have to sing these every night, but it brings the energy of my show down. And he said, to compensate for that, I have to really concentrate on finding more up-tempo songs to add energy to my show. So understanding things like that can help you write for the artist. Look at, if you can find a concert online to watch, or if you go to a concert, pay attention to the energy and the flow of the show. So in many shows, there's that one moment where the artist lets the band go off stage, and the artist comes out with their guitar or a piano, and they play a really intimate song and just have an intimate moment with the audience. Well, they can't do 5 of those in a show. That would be a really boring show. So if I'm going to write that kind of song, I have to understand those are going to be rare moments in the show. And if I listen to their record and go, oh, wow, they only had 1 ballad on each record, maybe, then I go, okay, if I'm writing a bunch of ballads, I'm putting myself in the land of, I've got 1 shot per record as opposed to 10 or 11 shots per record if I have up-tempo or mid-tempo. So understanding what slot it fills, and even like we talked about with Carrie Underwood a while ago, understanding that she didn't write those angry female songs helped me understand what slot I could fill if I wrote a really great one. So we wrote that kind of song, and she cut it. Number 9 is, don't assume every song has to be true, but look at each artist, and if you're targeting an artist, look at their music and see if it's all autobiographical or if they sing things that are obviously not them. So Blake Shelton sings a song called Old Red about, being in prison and escaping because of this shenanigans with the prison guard dog. Well, we know that's not true. But if you listen to other artists, everything they sing seems like it's true about them. And so you have to understand that aspect of, like, is this artist willing to sing a song that's not about them and not about their real experience? Or does this artist branch out and they'll sing a lot of things? So like a Reba McEntire sang Fancy. Well, we know her mom didn't turn her out as a prostitute to save the family. And Garth Brooks sang Papa Love Mama. We know his dad didn't run over his mom while she was cheating in a motel in his 18-wheeler. So there are artists that will play characters and will do that kind of song. There's a lot of artists that won't, and understanding that's really important because you can write, sometimes I'll see people that write so many story songs and they're good at it, but I have to say, are you hearing a lot of story songs like this on the radio? And they'll say, no, I'm not. I'll say, me either. There's just not many of those right now. So it's important to understand that kind of thing, whether they will sing things that are not true about themselves or if they want to be pretty autobiographical. And so when you're writing and targeting, you can give it a test. I call it the say, sing, and sell test. Can I hear the artist say this lyric to their audience? Can I hear them sing this melody naturally? And can I see their team selling this moment to the fans? So can I hear this artist say this lyric in an interview? Can I hear them sing this melody naturally? And can I see their team sell this moment to their fans? So I can't write a song for Kenny Chesney that sounds beachy and islandy, but it's about a totally different character that they're not going to believe he is. So for instance, I can't write a song that sounds like he's a romantic lover character, because that's just not him. Billy Currington will do that. So I had 2 love songs with Billy Currington. But if I want to cut with Kenny Chesney, I have to write something that's totally different than that. And then the next one is to research the artist like a writer, not like a fan. And I mentioned this earlier, think of yourself as a script writer for this person. And it's got to sound natural when they say it. It's got to sound believable. It's got to be in their language, so I can't use words in my song that Blake Shelton's not going to say, that don't sound natural. He's a country hillbilly guy from Oklahoma. So if I use a word like preponderance or some big word in my song, he's not going to do it because he doesn't talk that way and he can't sell that to his audience. So don't just go, I love this artist, I want to write for them. Dig deeper than that and really dig into that artist like we've been talking about. And the last thing to think about is that the best target written songs feel inevitable for that artist. And one of the things that was a big shift in my career is early on in my career, I wrote the best song in the room that day. I did my best every day to write the best song I could, but I wasn't targeting anything, and it really showed. And when I started targeting artists, I started getting cuts, and then I started getting big cuts. And then I realized that song that Carrie Underwood cut and we got the 2 million plaque on, it's because it sounds like a Carrie Underwood song. And we wrote it for her. And I've had 3 things that Kenny Chesney's cut that I wrote for him. And more and more and more, the songs that I'm targeting for an artist are landing. And I think it's because I'm doing this research and I'm getting a much better understanding of who the artist is, as opposed to just going. And this happens to me a lot. So like Billy Currington had my song Must Be Doing Something Right about 15 or more years ago. And it's a big song and he still plays it. But people will write things like that and come to me and say, can you get this to Billy Currington? And I'll be like, he did let me down easy like 2 albums after that one. But since then, he's not done a song like that at all. And so it can be easy to take one slice or one moment in an artist's career and go, okay, he loves R&B flavored country. Well, maybe he did 15 years ago, or maybe he kind of played that out. He was like, okay, that's enough of those. I want to move into something different. But you need to pay attention to those things. And so you want it to feel like it was written for them, but not in such a specific way that it can't be for anybody else, or it can't be relatable by anybody else. Um, so you want the label to hear it, and they go, well, of course, that's a Tim McGraw song. Sounds perfect for Tim McGraw and his audience and what he wants to say and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I'll get to the question in 1 minute. But the last thing I'll leave you with is just, what truth is this artist uniquely believable to sing next? And somebody mentioned this a while ago, like, we want to write things that sound believable for that artist, but they sound like the next thing that artist would say. And that's what's tricky about it, because that's a guessing game. But we can make an educated guess if we do all this research, as opposed to just a blind guess of, throwing spaghetti against the walls and hoping something sticks. All right, I'll get to questions here. How do I start building a network to pitch songs? Is it through their publishers, managers, producers? Two predominant ways. You either hire a plugger, or, like in our edge groups and our staff writer group, we have pluggers that people work with. So you either do that, so you have a relationship with people who already have all those relationships, or you start building those things organically. And that's time consuming, but that's the way it works, So, if let's say you pick an artist, and what I recommend people do is pick artists that you like what they do and you think you can speak to their audience, and they cut outside songs. Because there's no need for any of us to write a Taylor Swift song or a Kelsey Ballerini song, because they have written everything they put out. So you want to find some, you want to like what they do, you want to be able to speak to their audience, and you want to see that they cut outside songs. And then you can go, okay, I want to learn about this whole world of this artist. Like, who's their manager? What record label are they on? Do I have any connections to that person, or do I know somebody that has a connection to that person? And so Clay and I, occasionally, if we hear something great for an artist that we have a connection to, we send it to them, or we send it to their manager or their producer. But you just have to organically start. The more people that are in the industry, the better. And so if you find out who their record label people are and their manager and all that, follow them on social media. Interact with them, not interact by asking them questions or taking up their time, but when they post, hey, we just had another #1, congratulate them, and they see your name come across. Make sure that your social media name is your name, so that it doesn't say, Pink Frog 33 is congratulating me. Awesome. Who's Pink Frog 33? But, little things like that can be really effective because they see your name. And then someday when your song comes across their desk, they'll be like, oh, I remember that person. They're always, congratulating me on my social media. They're being positive, encouraging people. So I want to listen to this person's song, hear what they're doing. So either organically, or you work with people that already have those relationships. And, you can reach out to somebody. I recommend not doing this more than once, but you can reach out to somebody and say, hey, I've got one song I think would work for your artist. Would you be willing to let me send it to you? And sometimes they'll say no, sometimes you won't hear back, but every now and then they'll say yes, and then you get to send your song, you get it heard. And, best case scenario, even if they don't cut it, they say, hey, this is not great. It's not what we need right now, but it's a great song. Send me more, later on. If you have something else, feel free to send it, so you can start trying things like that to build a little bit of a relationship. But it's always better if they've seen your name before, and the first time they see your name is not a request for something, and that's why I recommend the social media stuff, because you can, get your name out there without asking something of people. Blake said, good question. If the pitch sheet's looking for a slower mid-tempo song, is it because they feel they have enough up-tempo fun songs Yes, usually it's the other way around though. Usually they're looking for up-tempo fun songs as because they don't have enough of those. But yeah, the pitch sheet usually tells you what they don't feel like they have enough of. Sorry, my voice is raspy, so I'm trying to drink water. How many of your co-writing sessions are now artist focused? I mean, every single time I write, I'm targeting something. So if I'm writing for sync, I'm targeting a particular brief or a particular kind of thing. Let's say I got a brief and I don't have anything for that Subaru commercial, but I go, I want to write some things like that so that the next time that comes around, I have a song. So I'll target that. I'm trying to write a Subaru commercial, or I'm trying to write for Blake Shelton, or if I'm writing in musical theater, I know which character I'm writing for and what kinds of things they would say. So yes, every single time I write, I'm targeting something because, like I mentioned early in my career, I was writing the best song I could write that day with a title that we liked, but we didn't necessarily have anywhere to go with it. And I did a mentoring session a while back with someone, and their songs were great. But my question for them was, where would you go with this song? And they said, I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me. And I said, I don't know either. And so they had a bunch of great songs that don't sound like anybody that's out there that would cut them. So, you want to, the reason I target something is because I have discovered that it's a lot easier to hit the target if you know what you're aiming at, as opposed to just shooting blindly and writing, and I think what a lot of people do is they write a song and then they try to figure out where to go with it. And that's not going to be as successful as targeting something and writing a song for a specific purpose. And like I said, even if you write a great song for aimed at one of those big artists, you're going to have lots of other places to go with it. Good question here. What makes the lyrics to a song upbeat or a slow ballad? It's just the melody creates the speed. You can, it can be either. So I can write a really slow melody, like a slow track, I'll say, and my phrasing can be really rapid over it. Or I can write a fast track and I can sing the notes more slowly and held out over that. So it can be either one. Typically, I think it's probably the track. So the music is going fast, as opposed to the lyrics, but it can be the lyrics. Good question. For a true amateur, is there value in posting online or creating a YouTube channel? Should we understand copywriting before sharing? I don't recommend. I mean, there's so much music coming out these days that's not likely to help you. And I don't go around worrying about people stealing my music, but at the same time, I don't just put it out there for everybody either. I think the greater value for you is to create it. Like if you want to create a YouTube channel that lets people see into the world of your songwriting, that might be really cool. And people might be interested in following that. And through that, they might be more interested in your music. But just putting your songs out there, I don't think is going to give you much advantage, so I don't do that, and I particularly if I had a really unique title, I wouldn't put it out there because you can't copyright a title. And, it's just unlikely that somebody's just going to stumble across your YouTube or social media, whatever, and find a song that they love and want to cut it. And it can hurt you too. I mean, I had a song that the label loved for Lady A one time, and they searched online and found that another artist had put a video of herself singing it at a radio station. And they were like, well, this song's already out there in the world. We don't want it. I'm like, no, please cut it. But it can hurt you to have it out there. So if an artist likes your song and they want to do it and they find out you've already got it out there, it could hurt you potentially. Um, let's see. Don't know anybody in the industry. My style of writing is quirky, but it's nice being here. Well, it's nice having you here. And you do know somebody in the industry now. You know me. And if you're in Songtown, you know Clay. So you do know some people in the industry. And, you know, if that's the kind of thing you love to write, there's still a place for that, you know. I love John Prine and Irish Dement have a song called In Spite of Ourselves that I loved. And so I got some friends together and we wrote like a whole EP of like, okay, what if they did an EP, what would it be like with two old people arguing in a song? And so we've just started releasing that music. We know that it's not likely to go anywhere, but we just put it out because we think it's fun, you know. And I do have sync reps that are pitching it for shows and that kind of stuff. Let's see. Good question. Have you ever rewritten a song that wasn't written to any particular artist to make it fit? I have not, but that's probably not a bad idea. I mean, what I should probably do is go back to some of my old songs and see if there's any of those that I could update and make them, you know, more targeted for an artist. You know, and it's just rare. I can think of one example in my career where I had a song I wrote just because I thought it was a fun idea and I thought lots of artists might relate to it. It was called I Want to Thank Everyone Who Ever Told Me No. I think the longest title I have in my catalog as well. But I just wrote that song, and 9 years later, this guy wins Nashville Star, which was one of the first like competition shows like American Idol, and he had been rejected by every record label twice or more, and so my song I Want to Thank Everyone Who Ever Told Me No was his way of kind of going, ha ha, see, you know, you shouldn't have turned me down. um, so it just coincidentally worked, but I don't like to rely on coincidence. I'd rather be more purposeful and more intentional about that. um, what type of posting counts as publishing so that instance counts as the first publication? Anybody can use compulsory license. I mean, in with that particular case, we had not licensed the song to the person. They just put it out there. To my knowledge, that doesn't count as, you know, because we didn't issue a license. We could have gone to that first artist and just said, hey, take that down, probably, you know, because we did not license it to her. But by then the damage was done. And then she wound up cutting the song and putting it out. So, you know, we could have ticked her off, I guess, and told her to take it down, but then she wouldn't have cut the song probably. For K-pop music, quirky lyrics with a lot of rhythmic parts are great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of the, and you know, in K-pop, the one of the funny things they do is that they'll often keep part of the English and get rid of part of the English. So if something was too quirky, they probably would just get rid of that and sing that in Korean, and then use the part that they do want to use. Let's see. Are you going to do a talk course on how you use disco? I do. I need to do that. I keep thinking maybe one of these Wednesday mornings I'll do that on Songtown Plus One, but I haven't put that together yet. You know, I'm just a big believer that the more intentional you can be, the better your chances are going to be. So if you write a really educated song targeted at an artist, you're going to have a lot better chance than if you just wing it, you know? So like if I'm just writing a beach song for Kenny Chesney, that might land, but the more I know and the more I can put these little things in there, the better chance I've got, you know? And so 3 states from her and 90 miles from Cuba, that's Tennessee, could be 3 states from Key West. 90 miles from Cuba, he knows it's Key West, so he could be talking about a girl in Tennessee. He lives in Tennessee. He loves Key West. It's, you know, so I'm connecting some dots that give me an educated shot at the artist. Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll shut the party down. Thank you all for being here. Hope that was helpful and gave you something to think about. But I think I would encourage you to give it a try. Pick a couple of artists, like I said, that you like and you can speak to their audience and they cut outside songs, and start being intentional about writing for those artists and see how that changes what happens with your music and how people respond to it. All right. Have a great rest of your afternoon and a great weekend. See y'all.